Good morning. Thank you, Tony, for the warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. Today, we really want to leave you with this idea of social capital, how to build it, how to promote it, how to enforce it on your school campuses. We really want to support the notion that with social capital, pretty much anything can be done. We can build it, we can get it done. And so as we start here today, we really want to start with this idea, this trauma lens. Want to be able to support the foundation of this growth in this social capital with just the basic, the bare minimum, the idea of understanding how trauma impacts our students. I wanted you guys to take a moment to look at this short video. It's about a 7-minute video, and really think about, as you're watching the video, can you relate? Think about what stories, anecdotal, that you've had and opportunities to be able to connect with those that you work with, those that are in the school system, particularly our students. Take a moment to think. So take notes, think about ideas, and enjoy the video.
So silence gives consent. And today what I'm hoping is we can break some silence, even when it's uncomfortable, because I think we want to do important things. What I want you to reflect on is if you or someone you know has experienced one of the following 10 events prior to the age of being 18: emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, feeling unloved or unwanted by your family, being afraid your basic needs might not get met, a divorce or separation of your caregivers, witnessing domestic violence in your home, someone with a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue in your home, someone in your home incarcerated, all prior to the age of 18. I've just defined adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, otherwise known as childhood emotional trauma. And it's a health risk that increases social problems in our community, raises our risk for disease, and can even shorten our lifespan. The Center of Disease Control names it as the prime determinant of health. And yet, unlike texting while driving or smoking cigarettes when we're young, for most of us, it's still an unknown epidemic. And yet 70% of the general population has had at least one of those events happen. That's 1,050 people in this room and about 7 people in your row. 1 out of 6 of us has had 4 or more of those events happen. And that's 240 people in this room and probably 1 or 2 people in your row. And yet we're not talking about it. Even though when it goes above a 4, some pretty hard statistics come about. At a 4, we're over 1,500% more likely to attempt suicide, over 550% more likely to become an alcoholic, COPD, liver disease, asthma. At a 6, we're more likely to die 20 years younger than our counterpart, at age 60 instead of age 80. And so we need to embrace what this silence costs us. I want to introduce you to Henry. At 18 months old, Henry moves into your community, and neighbors go to knock on his door, but they hear loud screaming and noise inside, and they look at each other and say, we do crime and watch and checking building maintenance, but I don't know if we're in for this. And so they walk away. At 2.5 years old, he goes to daycare, and they notice mom has a bruise on her eye, and Henry's kind of aggressive in class, and they go, "Director, should we do something about this?" "No," she says, "we're in charge of good quality childcare, not this." And so things go on. At 5 years old, he's put upstairs in his room and he hears a loud crash downstairs, and he comes downstairs and mommy's bleeding on the kitchen floor and dad's standing above her. 4 big police officers burst down the door. They grab dad and put him in the police car, grab mom, put her in the ambulance, grab Henry and lock him in the car. A woman comes and taps on his window. She has his things in a garbage bag and says, "Come on, let's go." He drives to a new neighborhood where he knows no one, falls asleep in a bed, not in his pajamas, crying himself to sleep. He wakes up in the morning going to a new school that he doesn't know, and the teacher yells at him because he has a hard time following the rules, and he says, "Wow, that sounds like Dad, and I don't even know where Dad is." And next, he moves from school to school, and his foster care parents get angry at him, and they start yelling at him and begins wetting his bed at night until a new social worker comes and says, "Come on, put your things back in the garbage bag. We got to move again." And he wonders how many places he's going to have to live, where his parents are, and if he'll see them again. His behavioral health file gets this thick, and so does his school file, until one day they tell him his parents aren't his parents anymore, termination of parental rights. And so now he's up for adoption, but nobody really wants him. And so he's in his 10th foster care placement at 11 years old, and foster dad and foster mom are fighting, and he thinks, "I'm never going to watch someone put their hands on someone else again." And he steps in and he takes a swing, and the next thing he knows, he's in handcuffs in juvenile detention. Now, that's a tough story to hear. And what I want you to think about is 12 systems and 50-plus people crossed Henry and his family's life, and yet no one thought it was their job to connect with them about that hard story. And that doesn't make sense to me because, right, we're caring people. All of us are. And so I wonder, maybe it's because we were taught it's not our role, it's not our place. Or maybe from a more hidden part of ourselves, we think that's Henry, that's his family. We can't change stuff like that. That's them and this is us. What I want you to hear today is this is not an us-them conversation. This is an all-of-us conversation. And if we choose to keep our story of silence, this epidemic's going to grow. And that feels uncomfortable, right? And if I'm doing this right, you feel uncomfortable because when we get uncomfortable, we grow, and that's a good thing. And you might be saying, Allison, what do you want me to do about this? I mean, I don't know how to break this silence. I might not have the right letters behind my name. I might not have any letters behind my name. I mean, violence and abuse, that seems like pretty big stuff. And what I would say to you is this: 70% of why anyone changes a negative health behavior is because of the person who connects with them and inspires them to change that. Relationship is the evidence-based practice, connection, and you don't need the right letters or any letters to do that. So I want to tell you about Kat. Kat had 8 of those 10 things happen before she was 19 years old. She went from residential placement about between the ages of 13 and 19, about 8 to 10. And she was the kid that broke windows and tore down doors. Sometimes she was held down in restraints and injected with Thorazine. She tells the story of a nurse who one time said, you know what, Kat, act your age, not your shoe size. I own this place. You got to come through me to get out of here. And that's who Kat would have thought she was until she met Howard, a mental health tech who had no letters behind his name, but he understood connection, and he was willing to go past his role. And he said, you know what, Kat, I get we need to connect, and he had to find her motivation. So he took her to the gym and said, you know what, I want you to exercise, and if you give me 1 solid hour of really good exercise, I'll let you go back to the unit and tear everything up. And she said, hell yeah, right? The joke was, though, that when she walked out of that gym, she was crawling and she couldn't lift a chair to throw, okay? And that was Howard's plan, although she didn't know that. And so Howard looked at her and he said, she began telling these chapters of her story. And he said, you know what, Kat, I see something in you. You're going to do something important in your life. Well, Kat had never heard that before, and so she liked that. So she did what Howard didn't plan and got locked up a lot to see him. That wasn't the intention. And so she came there one day, and he said, Kat, you coming here to see me? And she said, yeah. And he said, here's my schedule. Meet me in the lobby, right? We don't need to do that. So she did. That's how she got through high school. The thing is that hard stuff doesn't stop happening at 18. Kat went away to college. She was raped. She went through a serious suicide attempt, and she came back to the adult psychiatric institution, the same place where she was as a kid. Howard found out she was being admitted, and at 2 a.m, he came to her admission and said, Kat, please don't give up before you know what you can become. I'm going to hold hope right here till you're strong enough to grab it. Right here. That was the last time Kat attempted suicide, the last time she was locked in a residential placement, and the first job she ever had was a psych tech on a unit like Howard's because she promised to pay that connection forward. Now, we're sitting here with 2 stories, and that's the intention. For centuries, stories have taught us how to make meaning. Dr. Brené Brown teaches us that we are hardwired for connection, and that one of our deepest fears is disconnection, that fear of not belonging. And so we're sitting with the story of disconnection and connection, and that gives us a choice. We can think about Henry before he threw that punch, the 12 systems that crossed his path, the 50-plus people that chose not to connect, and we can think maybe if somebody had connected earlier, that story could have been different. And we can think about Kat, because Kat might not be who you think, because Kat's story is my story. My nickname throughout school was Alley Cat. And if Howard had not made a decision to connect with a kid like me, I truly believe I would have been in an institution, dead, or probably in jail. And so we're not powerful enough to know who's had trauma and who hasn't. We're not powerful enough to know who makes it and who doesn't. But we're powerful enough to do 2 things. 1, teach someone else about childhood trauma as a health issue. And 2, make that risk of connection. I think about if somebody came up to me and said, you know, Allison, I saw this awesome doctor on Friday talk about childhood trauma. And they told me that I should tell someone about it. And I'm wondering if you would listen. I think I would have listened, and I think it would have made a difference. Mavis Leno once said, if you want to make a difference in the world, the next time you see someone being cruel to another human being, take it personal, because it is. And what I would add to that powerful statement is the next time someone gives you the honor of walking their trauma, their pain story in front of you, answer that call with connection. Because you see, ordinary acts of courage can change this. It's not going to be the monumental events. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Welcome back. I want you guys now to take an opportunity. You guys are sitting in your group, sitting at tables. Take an opportunity. Amen and Abdul are going to go around, and I just want to hear you guys' stories. Take about 5 minutes together to sit at the table and share stories of times when you had the opportunity to just connect, to be able to get to know, whether it be students, parents, staff, whoever your stakeholders are, to get an opportunity to connect and reach them to be able to build that social capital. What did it look like? How did it start? How did the relationship start in the beginning? Where did it go? How did it progress? And so I want you to take 5 minutes, and then Amen and Abdul will come around and be listening about and walking about the room to gather some of those stories. So thank you all for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences with connection with your stakeholders and even some of your challenges. It's really appreciated because it helps as we self-reflect on how things are going and where we are. We might think about a student that on the first day we had a negative encounter. And so from there, what's the growth has looked like since? And so thank you for taking that opportunity to look at that. One of the key things is with this activity and with this thought process with connection is just to be aware that that how we connect and how we interact with one another it helps to build the foundation for what we need to support them later on down the line. Just recently, I was doing a training for a high school in Los Angeles Unified School District, and we were talking about and we were really delving into their policies and whether or not they were trauma informed and if they were really there to support and build the relationships between those in which they were intended to build. And in that, we were talking about the tardy sweeps and attendance, because we know that attendance is a foundation to all of this. We know that attendance is a foundation for how everyone gets paid, how the lights are on, and how the staff is in the building. And we know that that's an important component in terms of making sure that students are not only in class, in their seats, but in there on time. And so as we looked at their attendance policy, we realized that they were conducting a tardy sweep. And they found, looking at the data, that the tardy sweep was composed of the exact same 75 kids. Same 75 kids were tardy all the time. And from that, what we realized was that their attendance policy wasn't really even reaching the goal in which they were trying to reach. The students were still coming late, the same 75. And so they kind of thought about doing a different approach. And one of the approaches that they did, and was something simple, that instead of doing a tardy sweep, they almost did like social interacting. So they went out during the time that they would have done a tardy sweep, and they walked the campus. And they made small talk with some of the kids that are frequent flyers as part of being late to class or not going to class. And the 30, 45 minutes that they spent with those students to kind of get their story and get their information and be able to connect with them really supported them then attending class more frequently, because now they were connected with someone. They were connected with an adult on the campus. So as we leave and you continue on with your day with the training, the call to action that we really want to enforce, and something I want to leave with you, is that do something different. In the coming days and the coming weeks, do something different to connect with that most challenging stakeholder, that most challenging student, that most challenging parent, that most challenging staff member. Because this whole idea is we really want to build this social capital so that way everyone has relationships. Everyone is connected to somebody and feels like they're heard. One way that you can do this, and this is something that I hope that you all can try in the coming days, is this idea of 2 to 10. So for 2 minutes a day, for 10 days in a row, unbeknownst to the person you're doing it to, make somebody your project, make small talk. Be the person that goes and speaks to them, that greets them, that makes sure you compliment them on something that they did or something that you observed. to be able to begin to build the foundation of that connection. Even with our most challenging kids, oftentimes when I go into school settings and I support students and I ask students when they're in their most vulnerable state, who it is that they're connected to, sometimes our most challenging, behavioral challenging students say no one, and that's not okay. So the challenge for you today and to leave here today is to simply go out and make an intentional effort to connect.